And so our second speaker today is Chandra Breanne Curry. And in her main job, she is based at SLAC, where she is a project scientist with the Matter in Extreme Conditions Upgrade Project. But she is here in sort of her role because she is the LaserNetUS coordinator. And so she's going to give us a talk about what is LaserNetUS. And so, Chandra, the floor is yours.
All right, I'm unmuted and you should see my slides now. Everything looks okay?
Everything looks good, yeah. Thanks.
Perfect. Okay. All right. So in my talk today, I'm going to first kind of spend the first half of the talk going through what is LaserNetUS, just because there are quite a few names here today that I'm not familiar with and aren't currently engaging with LaserNetUS. So the first goal is to bring you up to speed and give the information you need for what we are and what we are trying to accomplish. And then the second half of my talk, I'm going to focus more on access to ALL's facility and the other LaserNetUS facilities and what our proposal process looks like currently in the current capacity. All right, so to get started, I want to give you a little bit of an overview of my background. So as Donna said, I am a scientist. So I did my PhD with the High Energy Density Science Division at SLAC, dually affiliated with the Electrical and Computer Engineering Department at the University of Alberta. And my graduate studies were all supported by NSERC. So I am Canadian. I'm very strongly tied here and invested in ALL's as a facility, and really very excited to see that we're getting this new funding in as a source for having more access to this facility. So during my PhD, I did a lot of experiments all over the world with high power laser facilities. So I've got quite a bit of broad experience on different classes of experiments, ranging from inertial confinement fusion to high repetition rate, high intensity laser matter interactions to kind of hot dense plasmas, warm dense matter. And so based on my experience, I really have this broad expertise, which kind of motivated DOE to point me to this position with LaserNetUS just over a year ago now. And so in this role, my main priority here is to expand the user community. And so as Francois was saying, we really want to build a broad and diverse and large scientific ecosystem around the use of these high power laser systems, because not only does it attract additional funding and investment, but there are a very, very large untapped number of applications for using these high power systems. And to do that, the LaserNetUS program is really starting to try to forge connections between these facilities, sharing of people, resources, and expertise, so that we're not reinventing the wheel kind of in isolation at all these facilities, so that we can bring all of our expertise together to do the most impactful science that has the largest impact. Okay, so in this first part of the talk, I'm going to give you first what is LaserNetUS and some of the quantitative metrics for the last 4 years since our inception in 2018, and then go through things like access and networking and our initiatives for workforce development and the applications. And then, as I mentioned before, I'll go into the proposal process and our current call for proposals. Okay, so LaserNetUS is a network of 10 high-power laser facilities, which are geographically located across North America. We've got a broad variety of institutions. So we've got high-power lasers that are located at national laboratories. So at the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, SLAC National Accelerator Laboratory, where I'm located, Lawrence Livermore. And so these are high power laser systems, which are funded by the US Department of Energy. And then we've also got a number of lasers that are located at university institutions. So these are the second type of facility that we have. And so LaserNetUS was established in 2018 by the US Department of Energy. And it has this central mission statement. And so there's kind of 3 aspects to that. First is to try to reestablish the kind of US leadership in high power laser technology and really advance the frontiers of laser science research. Second, we also have a very strong emphasis on providing students and early career scientists with broad access and opportunities and training within the network. And then lastly, what I said before is that fostering collaboration. And so bringing people together to solve these problems and execute these very complicated experiments, which really require a broad variety of expertise. So because we are 10 facilities that are operating essentially as a single user facility, we did have to establish quite a large management structure in order to really take advantage of all of the capabilities that we have. So the program is funded by the U.S. Department of Energy, Office of Fusion Energy Sciences. And the main management of the network is by our chair and vice chair, who are actually facility PIs. So they are, or point of contacts. So they are operate their own facilities as well as play a role in the management of the network. And then myself as the LaserNetUS coordinator. Below that, we have a number of subcommittees which have various different functions. I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but we have our Network Facilities Committee, which is our collection of our point of contacts at each of the facilities. And their responsibility is to carry out the awarded experiments and really lead the strategic direction of the network. And so they implement recommendations from our scientific advisory board and help plan some of the larger events. We also have a user group, which represent the needs of the user community. And then some more targeted initiatives. We have our diagnostics and our simulations committees. And then lastly, we've got our proposal review panel, which is our equivalent of the Beam Time Access Committee. And this is an independent and confidential committee of subject matter experts across the broad research areas of the network who are going to evaluate those proposals for both intellectual merit and broader impacts in order to award experimental time on our facility. And then our scientific advisory board is a collection of some of the most prominent physicists and people within our community, directors of other facilities, who can provide an external perspective to how we are operating and provide us with recommendations on areas we can improve or things that are going well. So the first part of LaserNetUS is really that piece of providing additional access and networking opportunities. And so the LaserNetUS network itself has a number of different laser systems that span a very large range of parameter space in terms of laser pulse energy and pulse duration. So you can see the Alls laser facility here in this kind of light green dot. We've got a number of these commercial Ti-Sapphire systems, as well as a collection of these longer pulse, higher energy systems for things like dynamic compression studies. And so these facilities span a very high impact laser regimes. And the idea here is that by providing access to all of these different laser parameters and through a common access channel, that the user community or our scientific community can really start design to go to the laser facility that best matches their scientific case, which is a little bit of a paradigm shift to the last couple of decades, where the facility that you would have access to, or the one at your home institution, really kind of set the limits on the science that you could pursue. So here we want to remove the barrier of access so that people can use the laser that most closely matches their scientific case. So LaserNetUS has been in operation now for just over 4 years. So our first call for proposals was back in 2019. And what you can see here is in blue is the number of proposals that were submitted to LaserNetUS, and then in orange, the number of experiments that were awarded. So we've got steady growth despite the kind of slowdown we faced due to the pandemic. And what's really fantastic with the amount of funding that we currently have through LaserNetUS, our acceptance rate is on the order of 50%. So this is really, really good compared to a lot of the other calls for other specific laser facilities. We have a very large distribution, kind of career level distribution across the people that participate in our experiments, ranging from scientists who kind of play the key role in execution of the experiments. But our next population is actually graduate students. So we're very pleased with the number of opportunities and training that has currently been performed within our network through these experiments. So to date, we have 10 facilities. There have been 70 experiments performed to date. So we're currently fielding the cycle 4 experiments. So this will push us up a little bit higher once all those are performed. And there's over 1,200 people now within the network who would be considered individual members. So people that engage with us through our experiments, our proposals, or have signed up to receive updates to get involved in the future with submitting proposals. So the next aspect of kind of really pushing for community growth is first developing our workforce and also providing information so that people can get over that initial entrance barrier to submit their first proposal, get on their first experiment, and get exposure to how we execute these type of experiments. So we've been thinking really hard about how we can do this and how we can kind of provide the initial guidance of how to get started. So one of the things we've been working on this past couple of years are developing proposal writing resources to support new users. So our user group in the second year now of having this annual how to write a LaserNetUS proposal. So Scott's going to go into this in more detail in his presentation that's coming up. So this is a great resource where we walk through what kind of things we're looking for, what the proposal content needs to be in order for your proposal to rank highly. Another thing that we are introducing for the first time this year is actually a proposal template. So up until now, it's been relatively free form with kind of required sections. But now we want to go the next step further and provide required questions, writing prompts, detailed character limits to really start standardizing the proposals that we're getting from across the board so that somebody that's maybe less familiar with the scientific proposal writing process can work through this with adequate information to prepare that proposal. And also by doing this, what we are able to do is to actually break out our proposal review process a little bit more clearly and have very specific questions that our review panel look at. So things like broader impacts in terms of student engagement. We can really, if everybody is answering the same set of questions and prompts, we're able to do a much better one-to-one comparison to actually rank these proposals and to fairly execute the review. So another part of this, in order to grow the community, it's very important for us that we put prioritization on the broader impacts of the projects, in addition to the intellectual merit. And so one of the things we look really closely at are these two aspects. So how does the project that you're proposing impact the scientific ecosystem and society? So who is benefiting from this? Are you bringing in new users, new institutions? Is this a new and innovative way of using high power lasers to do this type of research? Are you bringing in is it a very multidisciplinary project? Things like that. The second part is that workforce. So are you bringing in new users to this? Are you training people who will then go on to continue with research careers in this area, or even working in private industry to really grow this kind of highly skilled workforce in high power laser technology? And so this is very, very much at the forefront of how we evaluate our proposals. Another part of workforce development that we feel very strongly about is that in order to have a sustaining and growing community is to really attract and retain highly skilled students at the early stages in their career. And so LaserNetUS itself strongly encourages students, so PhD students, postdocs, and early career scientists, to be the lead PI on the experiments. And so based on what Francois says, we view this not as the last author on subsequent publications, but rather the person that is the kind of the intellectual lead on the project. So the person that is designing the experiment, writing the proposal, leading the team of researchers, and leading the analysis and interpretation effort afterwards. And so the oversight aspect of that, we have designated off onto a co-PI role. And so in this way, we're able to really allow students to take responsibility and have that early leadership training in order to design and field experiments. So finally, now after the pandemic, we were able to all come together for our first in-person meeting since the pandemic. So we had our first in-person meeting back in August in Fort Collins, hosted by Colorado State University. And so this meeting brought over 150 attendees to Fort Collins for us to have a lot of discussions and really great presentations by people who have performed experiments on our network or have experiments that are coming up. One thing I want to point out is that over 40% of our contributed talks were actually delivered by graduate students who had done research on the network. And so we are really coming to have a very strong student representation within the network. Okay, and then the last part of that is these all come together and we're able to do science now with these high-power laser systems in a number of different areas. So I'm not going to go into much detail about it, but there are so many applications both in industry, but also fundamental science research that use these high power laser systems, ranging from medical applications to EUV lithography and use for inspection in the semiconductor industry to things like non-destructive imaging. And so within our network already, our primary research up until now has kind of been the more conventional, high power, high energy density science type research, ranging from laboratory astrophysics to magnetized plasmas, and more fundamentally, the development of secondary sources. And so these research areas are well established and have been researched for many, many years. And now as our secondary sources are actually becoming much more stable and reliable, it's really allowing us to open up new areas, like, for example, Amina's research that was using the hard X-rays to do phase contrast imaging, which allows us to really expand into new territory in these application space, which is very, very important to Canadian investment. And so the capabilities across the network are very, very wide, as I mentioned before, where the users are able to take advantage of things like multiple beamlines, multiple target areas, and different aspects of the laser parameters themselves to really do this research. Okay, so just to summarize, and then I'll transition into the proposal process itself. So LaserNetUS is experiencing rapid growth, and we have a lot of support and we're getting users from quite a large range of topical areas and institutions now worldwide. And we're really working to attract and provide opportunities to new people as much as possible. And so in order to do that, we really need to continue to develop tools and have these conversations to provide that information so that people can begin to engage with our facilities. Okay, so with that, I'm going to transition to our proposal cycle. So proposals we accept on roughly an annual basis, and we're currently have an open call for proposals that are due December 19th, 2022. So going through that, so LaserNetUS experimental time, how is it awarded and what are we looking for? So like many mid to large scale science facilities, from laser facilities to telescopes, we operate using a proposal process, which allows a kind of written document that can be peer reviewed for multi different things, which are deemed the priorities of the community itself. And so the research proposal itself, this document really needs to answer three primary questions. So at a very, very high level, it should be able to clearly communicate what you're going to research, why it's worth researching, and how you plan on doing it. And so for us in the LaserNetUS kind of space, what does this look like? So it really comes down to about 7 steps. So the first one is identifying your topic in your research area and which facility you can do this best at. The next thing that we highly recommend is that you contact the point of contact. So there is a designated point of contact by LaserNetUS at each of the facility. So Francois is the designated point of contact, for example, at ALS, to discuss the proposed experiment. So none of the facility staff or personnel are on our proposal review panel. And so you're able to ask technical questions and actually work with them in order to craft your proposals and make them competitive for that thing. And then it's important to iterate on these technical details as needed with the facility. So if there's, for example, a new diagnostic or detector that needs to be developed, really narrowing in on what resources or what kind of time would be required to get those up and working. Then once you submit your proposal, we'll go through that a little bit more in the next few slides. So proposals will be submitted kind of end of the year time, and then we plan to announce them in spring. So our proposals themselves, so the full details of our calls are listed on the LaserNetUS website. So the link is right here. So lasernetus.org/proposal. And we provide a guidelines document. So this is a 6-page document, which has our guidelines and kind of the rules that govern our call for proposals, as well as our expectations for people that are awarded time. So for example, it's important, we require that our people that are awarded time use a particular acknowledgement in their publications after they're awarded, things like this, kind of these more details like that. And then we also have our proposal template, which I mentioned before is something new that we have as of this cycle, and both of these are available for download from the LaserNetUS website. So right now, we announced this is the calendar year, starting kind of the fiscal year for the US here from October to next year, the end of 2024. And so we announced our call in late October. And then we're in kind of this phase here of the proposal preparation phase up until this December 19th deadline. And so once proposals are submitted, they are evaluated for 2 criteria, which is broken down into subcategories. But from the high level, we have the intellectual merit and the broader impacts. And so the proposal review panel is between 20 and 30 people who are confidential. So we do not share who the panelists are in order to both protect so it's a single blind review process, and their responsibilities provide recommendations for which experiments should be awarded across the 10 institutions. And so something that's really great about the expertise that we have on this panel as well is in some instances, they may actually make recommendations to move proposals or to make suggestions on where users should reach out for particular diagnostics or capabilities. And so I didn't mention it up until now, but when you submit a LaserNetUS proposal, you designate a primary facility and you have the option of designating a secondary facility. And so the way that this works is your proposal will go into competition for that primary facility. And then if it's not deemed competitive or it would not be awarded time based on the proposal for that primary facility, it then is transferred into competition for that secondary facility, and then again goes through that, and then they're evaluated against proposals that are at that secondary facility. And then in some instances, the proposal review panel may recommend even a third facility that maybe the users haven't thought about or were less familiar with. And if the proposal review panel makes that recommendation for that third facility, the PI of the proposal will be contacted and asked if this is, and they can accept or decline that third transfer. So we put together the practices for our panel based on a number of different kind of well-established peer review processes for these proposals, mainly in the US. And then the proposal system itself is run by Slack. So it has 5 main components to the proposal review process. So we have a pre-review and a conflict of interest. So our proposal panelists will all receive the titles, the PIs, and the institutions, which will allow them to identify any proposals where they would have a conflict of interest, whether they have worked together in the past, or there's competition involved, and different things like that, so where they can recuse themselves from the evaluation of those proposals. And then our proposals are initially reviewed by 3 reviewers, which they're going to make assessments on these 2 evaluation criterias, which then comes up with a quantitative score. So the score itself is then used as a first ranking, which are then discussed by the full review panel in this full review meeting when the PRP panel meets in February. Once we have a first ranking of the proposals, then the shortlisted proposals are sent to the facilities for a technical feasibility review. And so this is a binary yes, well, it's feasible, it's not feasible, or if feasible with additional investment. And then once we have the scientific and technical review put together, we have the final decisions, which are made by FES and LaserNetUS management. Okay, so then this process itself extends out until into about April 2023. So this is when we plan on making the announcement of which proposals will be awarded through the cycle 5. And then these are for experiments that are scheduled by the facilities. So the actual scheduling of these are done by the POCs at each of the facilities themselves to give them the flexibility and to stack proposals and experiments in a way that maximize the kind of efficiency of that. So putting Betatron experiments together or putting similar setups in a way that you don't have to redo the setups. We leave that flexibility up to the facilities themselves because they know how to best operate in that way. So these proposals would be from kind of summer of next year up until summer of 2024. So I just want to highlight that so Alls has been a member of LaserNetUS now for 2 cycles, going into cycle 5 here this year, as I mentioned. And so we've now awarded 12 experiments free of charge through cycle 3 and cycle 4. And this is kind of gives you a perspective about how many experiments on an annual cycle are currently going to LaserNetUS. Now, there is some variability of this and what proposals that we actually get in a year and availability at the facility. But we're very, very pleased at the number of proposals that are going through to Alls right now. And with that, I'm just going to leave you kind of with our mission statement here, and I'll take any questions.
Thank you very much, Chandra. Okay, so we have a few minutes for questions. So this may be new to for people on the audience. So questions for Chandra and how best to get. While you're thinking about it, I'm just going to ask, what percentage right now coming to LaserNetUS are from outside the US? Not necessarily from Canada, but I'm just wondering what percentage of people are coming outside the US?
Let me actually, let's go back. I have, so 2/3, 1/3, approximately.
Oh, there was it? Oh, sorry, I missed that. Sorry.
No, you're all good. I didn't mention it when I talked through this slide. So yeah, roughly 2/3, 1/3 of international institutions here. This is computed by primary affiliation. So if somebody is duly affiliated with, say, in my case of Canada, the US, I would be listed as US because that's my primary affiliation. So there's a little bit of ambiguity in that. But.
And has it been growing? The international, yeah. I mean, you sort of said it at the beginning that it was getting bigger, but I'm just trying to, get a sense of.
I haven't looked at the metrics for the last cycles, the last 2 cycles. So these metrics are kind of calculated midway through. We will be collecting these metrics again in the next few months before LaserNetUS goes up for renewal. But there's definitely been a lot more international teams that are submitting proposals, which bring in a lot of new people kind of at once. So we've got some really great proposals that have come through from Apollon or from Luli, but also CLPU has sent a team, which they did an experiment at Colorado State University. So this is exciting that they're coming across to do experiments here with our capabilities.
Well, and I should ask then, Francois, do we have any constraints on us by CFI about whether or not our proposals could be international and not national?
There's no restriction.
Okay. So no questions for Chandra?
The only restriction we have is 1/4 of beam time to industry to have the matching fund. That's the only restriction.
And does that industry have to be Canadian? Or no, it's just a matching fund, so it doesn't even have to be Canadian?
It's better Canadian,
Yeah, I would think that.
but
would
I
be-
will not say it's mandatory.
Okay.
It's better, but it's not mandatory.
Questions for Chandra?